I titled it The Prayers for Israel. And as you open chapter 9, you see Daniel going, as he always does, to the Lord in prayer. And as you get into the second half, starting at verse number 20, where we'll be tonight, we see promises for Israel. And it's initially I had thought, I'll section this off into prayers for Israel and punishment for Israel. And yet, it's not just punishment, because we're talking about Messiah. Now, the punishment is serious, it's secure, it's sure, but so also is Messiah. So we have the promises for Israel that we're going to look at this evening. But before we get into all that, I do want to give us a review so that we can really understand the book of Daniel and how it was written and what it can help teach us. Now, as we began, we picked up in chapter number 2 a prophetic dream that was given to the king of Babylon named Nebuchadnezzar, and Daniel interpreted this dream for him. In his dream, he envisioned a great big statue, a great terrible image. Now, I've kind of got it up here like a game, and I want to see who has been on top of things here, and let's see who can remember what these 4 parts of the vision represent. First of all was the head of gold. In Daniel chapter 2 and verse 38, he specifically said, this head of gold, the most prosperous kingdom, he said, it is you, O king. So the head of gold represents what nation, Lila? Babylon. You took the easy one. That was smart. We got a competitor right there. I'm going to grab it while it's easy. Secondly, the vision revealed that this great image had a silver chest and arms. And he said specifically in the very next verse, he said to the king, you're the head of gold. The next one is inferior to you. So who is the second kingdom? Ethan. That's right, the Medes and the Persians, the Medo-Persian Empire. And I tend to remember this because, there's 2 arms and maybe it's 2 kingdoms, It just helps me to remember. And then the brass legs and the brass belly, same verse. Daniel interprets this for the king. And he says this is going to be a kingdom that's stronger. Brass is, it kind of represents judgment in the Bible. And he says this is going to be a ruling kingdom. What is the third world power that we're looking at here? Ethan, you can't take them all, buddy. You're the smartest one in the room. But you can't. You got to share. Fred? Greece. Very good. Very good. And so the third kingdom to come along would be Greece. Now, these 3 kind of happened fairly quickly, kind of sequentially. Greece did last a while. And Greece didn't get cut off as quickly. When Babylon got cut off, boom, bam, it was over. Medes and Persians, it was a kind of a swift takeover. Alexander conquered the world in a decade, man. And but then Greece kind of fizzled out over centuries. And it was just Rome winning one victory after another to defeat them. But you come to the iron legs that mixed with clay in the feet, and really the vision kind of shows us that the 4th kingdom wasn't cut off like the 3. It just kind of dissolved, and as I've marked here, it is the divided kingdom. That's on the next slide. So the strong kingdom, the divided kingdom, is the what kingdom? Class? Rome. All right. So Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. Daniel interpreted this by the power of the Holy Spirit and told Nebuchadnezzar, this is what you can expect. He said, these are going to be the 4 kingdoms. Now, what is the whole point and purpose to this thing? The whole point and purpose of the book of Daniel, there is like this common theme to Daniel, and that is very simply this. Men without God are beasts. Men without God are beasts. There's tons of beasts and weird creatures in Daniel, and they represent bad rulers like Caesar, bad rulers like Alexander, really horrible, horrible dictators. But all men without God are beasts. And isn't it something that when you come along and you find the ultimate evil guy, the Antichrist, he is just simply called the beast. We have the illustration of Nebuchadnezzar, who lost his mind and behaved like a beast out in the wilderness. So that's the general theme. Men without God are beasts. But we come to chapter 9 that we're going to get into tonight, and it's the great hope. It's the great unveiling of Messiah. Thank God for Jesus. So chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's dream. We move ahead to Daniel's first dream. His dream was in chapter 7. Daniel had 3 visions. One was a dream. If I remember right, he was sleeping during this one. And there were 4 beasts. There was a lion that was winged. Its wings were plucked, it fell to the ground, it stood up, and it was given the heart of a man. The bear came along, and he was lopsided, stronger on one side. He had 3 ribs in his mouth. The winged leopard came, he had 6 wings, and he moved very swiftly, 4 heads, and dominated very quickly, coming out of the east. And then the last one was the dreadful beast with teeth of iron, destroying everything. Daniel 7:17, it's so super pointed. It just says, these great beasts which are for kings. You know, the Bible does not leave us guessing. The Bible, we do guess because we're so inferior to God, but it's not God's fault. All right, so the Bible is so clear. It's like, these 4 beasts are 4 kings. That's easy. Now, let's see if we can remember the names of the 4 kings. The first one, the winged lion who fell down, was given the heart of man. He stood back up again. Who was that? It's the easy one. Come on, folks. It's the easiest one. You want to get this one. Sister Zenny, I know you know it. Nebuchadnezzar. There it is. And the dream said he'd be given the heart of the man. And that's like when he went crazy. And then he got his sanity back and he praised God later. The bear was lopsided. So this is like those 2 kingdoms that came together, but one was so much superior to the other. And so we see a lopsided beast. The kingdom was the Medes and the Persians. And the king specifically, and it had many kings, but the king that it was talking about was Cyrus. It refers to Cyrus. There's actually 2 Cyruses at least, maybe more. But the first Cyrus was the one that conquered Belshazzar. You guys remember Belshazzar? He was the one who saw the writing on the wall. And that very night, he was killed and the country was destroyed. That was good old King Cyrus. Not a good old king. Okay, I don't know why I said that. Winged leopard. This is the fastest. Moved swiftly. This king took over everything in a decade. Alexander the Great. He was just seriously maybe the greatest military mind in the world. 21 years old, received the army, and just decided war was the life for him, and he went out and destroyed everything. So he was that winged leopard moving very swiftly. Again, it's something to bear in mind. 10 years to conquer what is now thought of as the entire Middle East. We're talking about nations like Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, even over into Egypt, and up towards Rome. So this is a very large area, and in a day and age with like no electronics, no cars, no nothing like that, I mean, they conquered that whole known world in a very, very brief amount of time. But he died. They all died, don't they? Now you come to the dreadful beast. This was the one that had the iron teeth. And by the way, this thing was so terrifying and so dramatic. I don't recommend that you look up anyone's drawings of these beasts. You know, I don't put pictures up. I think we should stick with the word pictures. So don't look up pictures. But if you happen to look some up, a lot of guys put pictures of dinosaurs or dragons, you know, and the most scary creature you can imagine. But it was so terrifying, Daniel was only interested in this beast. And maybe it's because he saw Nebuchadnezzar come and go. Maybe it's because he was, you know, well into the second dictator. But the fourth one was different. It was terrifying. Not only was Daniel interested, there was an angel asking another angel about this beast. All right, so who is the fourth most terrifying ruler? Antichrist. Good job, Marcus. Okay. All right, good job, Marcus. The Antichrist. And so I think really the way to consider the Antichrist is he's going to be the sum of these beasts. There's a particular theory that maybe the Antichrist will be possessed by the spirit of a Caesar. I'm not really sure I'm on board with that theory. And just here's one of the reasons why. I think the beast is the amalgamation of like all the Caesars and all the Hitlers and all the Nebuchadnezzars. This guy is the worst, and he's going to make the Caesars look like child's play. He's a bad, bad man. We're going to talk about him tonight. And by the way, Daniel's third vision, which goes across 3 chapters, is a lot about Antichrist. The Bible speaks a lot about this wicked, wicked man. All right, now we come to Daniel's second dream. This was in chapter number 8. His first dream was chapter 7. His second dream was chapter number 8. And you'll remember these wild animals. First of all, he says specifically, I had my dream. In my dream, I saw the river Shushan. Shushan is a big deal in the book of Esther, but it's not a big deal at this point in history. It's just a village. The river of Shushan was a man-made, hand-digged canal. All right, but he recognized it. He says, I was there at the river Shushan. I looked at the river, and out of this thing, he saw an animal come forth, and he said this ram was moving about, or rather this goat was, the ram was moving about, and so the river Shushan represents Persia. Out of Persia comes the ram. Now, let's remember that in this dream, we see a ram and we see a he-goat, a strong goat, a rough goat. It has all those names. The rough goat destroys the ram. But bear in mind, in this vision, the animal represents a kingdom and the horn represents the leader. So this first animal is the ram, and he comes out, and it says that he has this one horn that's bigger than the other. In fact, the one horn was growing and growing. Even as Daniel was looking on, he could see one horn outgrowing the other horn. And this represents that imbalanced Medes and Persians empire. And then out of the east comes the rough goat. He's moving at such a tremendous speed, his feet don't even hit the ground, and he has a notable horn. He has a horn that is like right in the middle of his eyes. It's notable, the Bible says, like I'm thinking rhinoceros or unicorn or something like that, and he plows straight into the ram, annihilates that thing, turns it into dust, and this notable horn, first of all, the he-goat is Greece, and the notable horn would be Alexander. And it's actually, you can look right there, Daniel 8:21 says, and the horn is the king of Grecia. So very clearly, that is Alexander. Now that notable horn breaks off. Why? Because Alexander died at a very young age. 4 more horns come up, 4 little horns. And history would tell us, if you look, Alexander's kingdom, I had a map of this several weeks ago, was divided into 4 areas. It was divided amongst 4 generals. Boy, when somebody like Alexander dies, all of a sudden, all these generals and politicians and senators, they all start trying to get more power. They wanted to be the next Alexander. It was gross and brutal and horrible. And, men are beasts. And so they're all trying to snatch at power, and it was divided into 4 kingdoms. And the Bible tells us in Daniel chapter number 8 that this little horn grew out of one of the 4. That's weird, right? I would not ever want to look at a goat that had a little horn growing out of one of 4 horns. This is just a gross mutant, But here comes this thing, and the little horn begins to speak and becomes more powerful. The Bible says this little horn waxed great in the earth. Now, so you say, all right, so this must mean that the Antichrist is from Greece. So we should look at Greece. What's going on in Greece in the news? But the problem with that is if you go back to chapter 7, you go, oh, the Antichrist is from Rome. So we're going to look at Rome and see what's going on in Rome. And maybe it's in the Catholic Church, and we get all these wild ideas. One thing to keep in mind is we should not think of Rome and Greece like modern day 2020 Rome and Greece. You look them up on the map and they're like these little welfare, tiny little countries, like whatever, right? They're nothing. But if you look at the days of Daniel, and if you look in the prime times of when these kings like Alexander was alive, it was the entire Middle East. Babylon, Rome, Greece, they all covered practically the same territory from India to Egypt. It was a very large piece of property. So what's the point? Well, really, I think the point is, for one, spiritually speaking, or maybe spiritually speaking, I really believe that Antichrist is the ultimate Gentile, unsaved man. He could come from anywhere, according to that spiritual idea. Physically, I do believe that he could come from anywhere in the Middle East. I don't necessarily think it's beneficial to go looking around like, is that him? Is that him? Is this him? You don't know, man. You don't know. And I think every time you see some person who rises to power, and the Muslims are all looking for a Messiah, and Saddam Hussein wanted to be that Messiah. Well, then you go, oh, well, he's not the Antichrist. But every time somebody like him rises up, people start speculating. Is this the Antichrist? Could it be this president or that leader or whatever? And I don't think that's necessarily beneficial because realistically, this is not very specific. We're talking about a pretty large area of land. It referred to as the divided kingdom. In the first dream of the statue, you have these 10 toes that were made of clay and iron. It's just like, it's divided. It's no longer as specific as perhaps in Alexander's day. Now, I want to break down the chapters for us. One of the most important things that you ought to do in studying the Bible is understand how a book of the Bible was written from the bird's eye view. So when you look at Daniel, I want us to see that Daniel was written in such a way, I think maybe I can do this, that you see these right here. Is that working? Whoa, technology. So these right here that are all linked with these little chains, these were written primarily for the world at the time, Babylon, to read. So they were written in Aramaic. These here on the end are written in Hebrew, and the beginning is written in Hebrew. So these are really, in a lot of ways, separate from the others. And as you're looking at them, you're going, okay, those middle Aramaic ones, those are more like narrative. This is where you find Daniel in the lion's den, the fiery furnace, and Nebuchadnezzar turning into a wild beast, and the writing on the wall, and their stories. These are the really easy chapters to get. You read it and you go, oh yeah, I understand. They're so easy, we teach them to Sunday school kids. But then you get to the second half, and it's more of the prophecy. And it's where people love to talk about so they can make money on TV. But these are where the prophecy is. This is where you find the beasts and so forth. But it's always important to see how is a book laid out, because, friends, quite frankly, Americans did not write the Bible. And the writing style is not quite like ours. So if you notice, these kind of make a little loop right here. Let's notice chapters 2 and 7, King's dream, Daniel's dream. Chapters 3 and 6, fiery furnace, lion's den. So this is God's children getting punished by the government. And then you see 4 and 5, Nebuchadnezzar's pride, Belshazzar's pride. See how those kind of are making this loop? Daniel did not write his story in chronological order. He wrote it by topic. And so you have narrative, and then you have his visions here. His second vision, his prayer, and then his third vision. All right? And with that said, I do want to get into Daniel chapter 9 this evening and pick it up where we left off. Last week, Daniel was praying, and he taught us how to pray. And there's something to be known about Daniel. Daniel very obviously knows the Word of God. And that is the number one priority to prayer. You have to know the Word of God to properly pray. Daniel prayed for things and did not have a professor to teach him the Bible. He was ripped away from Judaism. He was brought into Babylon, surrounded by pagans. But he knew the Word of God. He committed himself to the Bible. And so even, check this out. We're going to pick it up in verse 20. And whilst I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God, yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, who I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. Pardon me. Let's jump back to verse number 1. It says in verse number 1, In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years. Remember what we said? His understanding of the books meant he understood the Bible. I understood by the Bible the number of years. Wherefore the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. Now you jump to where we just read in verse 20, and he says, I was praying, and Gabriel came to me at the time of the evening oblation. Can anyone tell me what time of day is the evening oblation? Right? You don't know because you're not a Jew. He knows because he was studying the books. They didn't keep the evening, oblation means sacrifice. They didn't keep the evening sacrifice in Babylon. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This is the time of day that in the temple, the priest was supposed to slay the lamb. Daniel was praying and recognized at the time of day when the sacrifice, he was in Babylon, he was in captivity, but he was living spiritually in Jerusalem. You feel me? He was physically enslaved, but he was mentally and spiritually in tune with God. And so here he is, he has the books. I don't know how he got them. I mean, remember, this guy, he climbed the ranks in Babylon. He's very powerful. He got the books. He gets the books, he's understanding them, and he has committed himself to praying. And it told us back in chapter number 6, when they threw him into the lion's den, chapter 5, it says that he was committed to praying 3 times a day. It wasn't just like, I pray for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. He was praying according to the Jewish customs. This guy was committed to the Bible. I want to encourage you, friends, commit yourself to the Bible if you want to know exactly how God wants you to pray. So Daniel says, I'm praying, and at the time of this evening sacrifice, the man Gabriel speaks to me. Gabriel has already spoken to him. He's already interpreted dreams for him, but he's back again, and he makes note of this, very important. He says, he has visited me at the time of sacrifice. It would not surprise me if Gabriel showed up like on the minute. Now, they didn't have minutes back then. They only had hours. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was like dead on the time of the sacrifice. Gabriel appears unto the man Daniel, and he says, I'm here to answer your prayer. Let's consider the idea that our prayers are oblations. Our prayers are sacrifices. Mark this one down. Psalm 141:2. Psalm 141:2. Let my prayer be set forth before thee as incense, and the lifting up of my hands as the evening sacrifice. Isn't that wonderful? Now, you might recall, if you can rewind like a whole year in your brain to when we were in Revelation 8:3. We're looking into heaven. There's the throne of God. The Spirit of God is seated there on the throne, and before him is this great altar. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer. And there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hand. Isn't that a wonderful picture? The Old Testament psalmist says, Lord, let my prayers be a sacrifice. And then you get a peek into heaven, and they actually are a sacrifice. The altar of God isn't bringing up the aroma of a lamb. No, his son is the lamb. But his altar is bringing up the prayers of his saints. What a wonderful picture. What an encouragement to pray. So while Daniel was praying, the angel Gabriel, swiftly, it says, comes to him. Now, do not picture in your head that Gabriel's like the pretty one. All right? You guys have seen that, right? It's like you have Michael. Michael's always the one decked out for war. And Gabriel's got like these nice golden locks of hair. And people always give him a harp, like he's related to music or something. Man, Gabriel, it means strong man of God. All right? He's not like the pretty boy in heaven. He saw a man, okay? And the Bible says he saw a man, and it was Gabriel, the strong man of God. Angels are not depicted as white dresses, wings, and halos, all right? There are some heavenly creatures that have wings, and they have different purposes. Ezekiel and Isaiah, they saw creatures that had wings, but they used them to cover themselves in humility, to cover themselves before God. Some of them touched their wings together in the tabernacle. But it doesn't say anything about angels having wings. And by the way, they're spiritual creatures. They don't have to follow the laws of aerodynamics, right? They don't need wings to fly. So goofy. But here he comes, and he flies swiftly, and he appears with Daniel. And he says, I'm going to describe to you the interpretation. Look at verse number 22. He informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee. Look, I think there's something to be said here for Daniel's dedication to prayer. We're going to see in chapter number 10 how Daniel committed himself to praying for a month before God answered his particular prayer. And here, Gabriel's first note is from the time you started praying. We don't know what time he started praying, but he prayed all the way till the evening sacrifice. He said from the time you first started praying, the commandment was sent. Gabriel was sent to bring the commandment. He says, I'm come to show you. For thou art greatly beloved, therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. Hey, you're beloved. God wants you to know the Bible. Verse 24. This is big. This is mountaintop big in the book of Daniel. This is huge, what he's about to say. This gives us the groundwork and the foundation for end times prophecy. Daniel 9:24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. The 70 weeks are seen here in verse number 24. The 70 weeks are God's great big plan for Israel. This is exciting. This is a guy, Daniel, who was taken from his country, and what he was told by Jeremiah, you'll remember, Jeremiah said because Israel had violated God's Sabbaths, God would punish them with Sabbaths. And so Jeremiah said, you are going to be in captivity for 70 years. God taught them back in Exodus, you have to keep the Sabbath. Every seventh day, you need to rest. Every seventh year, your land needs to rest. Every 50 years, there is the year of Jubilee, a great big feast Jubilee. And all these were called the Sabbath rests. Israel was not doing that. Israel had it in their head that, you know what, we could probably prosper more if we worked 7 days instead of 6. Or if we played on the seventh day instead of honor God, whatever. They went into idolatry, and because God says, you violated my sevens, the word Sabbath, my sevens, I'm going to punish you with sevens, and so they got 70 years of punishment. Now, Jeremiah wrote 70. Daniel read 70. Daniel is 70. And he's going, it's time to go home. He was ready. Get me out of here. And so that's why he's praying. Look. Verse number 20. What was he praying? While I was speaking and praying, look at this, and confessing my sin and the sin of my people, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of God. And remember we talked about last week, he said over and over, he was praying for God's sake. He was praying for this 70 years to come to an end. Lord, and so what he did, he said he read it in Jeremiah. It compelled him to pray. So now he's praying. Yippee, it's time to go. There's a great expectation. And now Gabriel shows up, and Gabriel says, well, it's no longer 70 years of punishment. It's 70 prophetic years of punishment. It's 70 weeks. In other words, 70 sevens. You're not going to be in captivity for 70 years. You're going to be in captivity for 490 years. That is some bad news. Here's this guy, woke up, spent all day in prayer. Who knows? Probably started early, went all the way till the evening sacrifice. Gabriel shows up and he says, I've got an answer to your prayer. What's your first thought? Yes! God's answering. I'm going home. Take me home, Gabriel. You're the man. And he says, 70 weeks are upon thy people. What? 70 Sabbath, or 70 sevens. It's not the word Sabbath. But 70 weeks are upon your people. So Gabriel was speaking to him for these periods of time. Now, keep in mind that this does relate specifically to Daniel's people. So that's why verse 24 is very important. 70 weeks, so 490 years, are determined upon thy people. Okay, trivia time. Who is Daniel's people? Jews. Thy holy city. What is Daniel's holy city? Jerusalem. So the 70 weeks are on the Jews in Jerusalem. This is God's plan for God's people. Why? And then he lists these 6 things: to make an end to sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. The first 3 are punishment. The second 3 are righteousness. He says, here's 3 reasons: punishment and judgment. Second 3 reasons: for righteousness, for Messiah, for reconciliation and restoration. Daniel was praying that God would forgive sins. Daniel was praying that the city would be rebuilt. Daniel was praying that the temple would be restored. And Gabriel addressed all of these things. God is speaking specifically to his people. Now, I wanted to show you a timeline to get you an idea of what we're talking about here. So this is BC. Nebuchadnezzar in 605 BC conquers Jerusalem, takes Daniel, moves them back to Babylon. So that's 605 years before Jesus Christ, right? Nebuchadnezzar lives for a number of decades. And then you have Belshazzar. There's another little blue line back there behind Belshazzar because there were other Babylonian kings. But Belshazzar is the notable one in the Bible. Belshazzar saw the handwriting on the wall. He got conquered by Cyrus. And so you see the incoming Medes and Persians. The way that this lines up with the scripture is, as you can see here, chapters 1 through 3, captivity, the Hebrew boys in the first couple of chapters, they get thrown in the fiery furnace. Chapter 4 is not for many years later. Great big gap there before God started speaking again to Daniel. And then chapter 7 and 8, but you'll notice 5 and 6 are way over here at the end of Belshazzar. Daniel, and the reason for this, Daniel was receiving dreams prior to Belshazzar dying. But remember, this is not a narrative. He didn't write it chronologically. He grouped it by topic. So it's like, here's some history, and here's some prophecy. That's why the overlap happens like that. But you can kind of see, this is not a very large period of time we're talking about here. 3 kings. Daniel lives to see all 3 of them. You know, by the time you get to Cyrus, he's like, whatever, another dictator. You know, I've seen them. They come and they go. And he's seen visions of the ones to come in the future. And the Medes and the Persians would last for centuries. During the time of Cyrus, and I don't know when Daniel died, but probably around this time, a priest named Zerubbabel leads a group of Israelites back to return home and to rebuild the temple. So you have this returning home. God said, you know, by Jeremiah, he said, you get 70 years of punishment. And then he says, nope, now you're going to get 77s. But during this time period, God is allowing some restoration to happen. He allows Zerubbabel to lead men back into Jerusalem, to make the long journey back to Jerusalem in order to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. They lay the foundation, and then they kind of forget the rest. Don't ask me why. They lay the foundation, they got real excited, they had a worship service, and then I preached on Haggai a couple weeks ago. You'll remember God told them, you're going about decorating your own houses, and you're leaving my house in ruins. That's what's going on right here. Jesus came for the reconciliation of Israel. Daniel's praying, and about this time here where the red box is, God gives him a vision, and he says it's going to be 70 weeks of punishment. But he is praying nonetheless. So when you come, and so what I've done is I've like scooted it over, all right? So you see chapter 10 and 12. That's where we're going to be next week. Zerubbabel is over there, and you see a great big time period, 120-ish years, and you come to Ezra. So Daniel's long dead and gone, right? He's out of the picture. But Ezra comes along. He brings now a second remnant back to Jerusalem, and Ezra is most known for teaching the law. Some scholars call Ezra the second Moses. He didn't do any building, but he was there teaching the law. Great stuff from Ezra. And then Nehemiah, very, very popular story. I was just talking to Brother Bill earlier about I don't like to use Old Testament stories to like promote New Testament things like, hey guys, we're going to build a church building and I'm going to preach from Nehemiah to tell you why. I don't think that's how you use the New Testament and the Old Testament. But Nehemiah was known as being the builder. He rallied people together. They had a hammer in one hand, a sword in the other. They got to work. I love Nehemiah. Great guy. And what they were doing was continuing to build up Jerusalem. They're building the temple. They're building the walls. Now, you'll see that little white arrow there that it says the first prophetic week. All right, let me explain that. Look at verse number 25. Verse 25 says, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment, what commandment? The commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem. Oh, so it's not really one commandment we're talking about here because this takes like 130 years. He says, from the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, Jesus Christ, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. That is equal to 69 weeks. How many weeks total? 70. He says, from this mark right here, from the point where they go back to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem, from that commandment is going to be 69 prophetic weeks until Jesus Christ. So you know what happens? You take the duration of a prophetic Jewish year, which is according to the moon, not according to the sun. So, in short, 360 days. You take 360 days and multiply it by these numbers of weeks, and it leads you right up until Jesus walking into Jerusalem, riding a donkey, preparing to be sacrificed on the cross. It's right there in black and white. He said, from the time that the decree is written, you have 490 prophet years until Jesus the Prince comes. And Jesus comes riding in a donkey. And what do they say? Hosanna to the Son of David. The prophecy fulfilled right there. Daniel is so perfect. Daniel's prophecy is so awesome that skeptics can only say, oh, no, this book had to have been written centuries later. Daniel didn't write it. It came after Jesus, and it's so perfect in its predictions. I mean, it's talking about Alexander the Great 300 years before the guy was born. Awesome stuff. Jesus died on the cross, and he's fulfilling verse number 24. Jesus was making an end of sins. He was making reconciliation for iniquity. This is the prophecy. Now, verse number 25. It's broken up weird, right? It says, the time shall be 7 weeks and 60, which is 60, and 2 weeks. Why not just say like 69 weeks? Why not say 60 and 9 weeks? Why does it say 7 and then 60 and then 2? So there's 3 time periods that we're looking at specifically. First of all, period 1 is a 49-year period. During this period, the Jews will rebuild the city of Jerusalem in troubled times. And the decree allowed them to go back, allowed Nehemiah to go and build and to restore the gates. So you have this thought here. You have another period of time, 483 years, and that is that Gabriel affirmed that from the time of Nehemiah to the time of Jesus would be prophesied 483 years. This is when you do the math, the Jewish calendar, by these numbers. You can't use our calendar. Our calendar was written by the Roman Catholics. Okay? But if you use the Jewish calendar, then you come up with that time. You end up with AD 29, AD 30, right there when Jesus was crucified. Now, his crucifixion was by the Romans, and that's what it says here in verse number 26. After 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. All right, so we've already said that Antichrist is from Greece. We've already said Antichrist is from Rome. Now, according to history, which nation destroyed the temple shortly after Jesus? Well, it wasn't Greece. They were already gone. So it was Rome. Rome destroyed Jerusalem. Rome destroyed the temple in the year AD 70. This is after the Bible was totally written. So it says the people of the prince that shall come destroy the city. So you go, what people destroy the city? Rome destroy the city. Their prince is Antichrist. And the end of that period shall be with a flood. That is like just total all-out war is what that means. Many times the Old Testament uses the word flood to talk about like total devastation. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. Verse 27, this is continuing to talk to us about Antichrist. He shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. Okay, what does that mean? The prophecy timeline gives us 69 weeks of prophecy up to Jesus. Now, the 70th week is the week of tribulation. It's the 7-year tribulation. So the final week, the final 7, is the tribulation. So did the tribulation happen like when Jesus died? Did it go like 68, 69, 70? No, it didn't. It didn't. The Great Tribulation did not happen right after the 69th week. There's like a pause. If it was a sand timer, God took the thing and put it on its side. It's at rest. And some people might argue with you that it happened prior to Christ. Some people would argue that in the year 150 or so, there was Antiochus Epiphanes. We talked about him a couple weeks ago. He was a king that waged war against Jerusalem. Some people say that was Antichrist. In AD 70, the Roman Emperor Titus, he destroyed Jerusalem. So in AD 70, some people say that was Antichrist. The problem is with those, we're talking about a worldwide war that leaves all things desolate. Titus didn't do that. Epiphanes didn't do that. Okay. So those guys were like pictures. Those guys were, hey, Antichrist is really horrible. Antichrist will strike. And I really believe that Jesus gave Jews warning in Matthew that allowed them to be safe during Titus. But none of those guys are Antichrist. Am I losing you guys? Maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit. All right, let me just try to simplify this. 70 weeks are upon thy people. I'm going to break it down. You get 69 weeks from the time of this decree here all the way up until Messiah. Messiah is going to come, and then it says Messiah shall be cut off. And then the people will destroy the holy city and the temple. That did happen in AD 70. Is there a Jewish temple today? No. It was destroyed a very long time ago. And Jesus talked about that in Matthew 24, and he gave them warning for that. But ultimately, there's going to come a time where the Antichrist is going to be the worst. To give you an idea, verse 27 explains it to us. He says, we're going to have a peace treaty, the word covenant. We're going to have a peace treaty. Everyone's going to get along. People are going to say, oh, yeah, the Jews and the Arabs are getting along. Praise this guy. He's Nobel Peace Prize right there, baby. You know he's going to get it. And he's going to get everyone all on board, one world government, all the stuff that you read about in Revelation. And then it says right here, right in the middle of it, he cuts it off. So 3.5 years in, you start reading in Revelation, you start reading 3.5 years in, he turns on everybody. He's no longer the peacekeeper. He's a wicked tyrant. The worst ever. Antiochus Epiphanes went into the Jerusalem temple and he set up a false idol in the Jews' temple. Imagine, that's just horrible, right? He goes into Jehovah's temple and he sets up a false idol. Antichrist will set up himself in the temple of God. So you have a very, very, very wicked man. And all these things that were pictured in all of these rulers. You can read about Alexander. You can read about Hitler. You can read about Antiochus. A lot of these guys really fit the picture, the ones that oppressed the Jews. But the worst is coming, and that is Antichrist. Now, here's the point, though. Here is the point. When you are reading something like Daniel, and you're reading prophecy, always emphasize the first portion, not the secondary portion. So what was the first portion? Messiah is coming. Second portion is Antichrist. Okay? But he says Jesus is coming. Verse 25, Messiah is coming prior to Antichrist is coming. So we want to always emphasize that Jesus is coming, and there is a great hope for Daniel. So poor Daniel, he's praying. Gabriel shows up, and he says to him, you get 70 sevens of punishment. But there's hope. Daniel got this awesome, awesome picture. Messiah, the Prince, is coming. So I think probably Daniel, by faith, he could go to bed that night with great hope that Jesus is coming. Help us, Lord, to have eyes of faith. I know that some of this stuff is really deep, and I'm not really doing a great job of teaching it, Lord. I pray that your Spirit would help us to understand it. Lord, I pray that you would fill in the gaps, help us all to have a clear idea of the book of Daniel. And I pray, dear Father, that in all of this we would give you the glory. Help us to pray like Daniel. He was a guy that used the Bible to know how to pray. He was committed to prayer. He prayed for long periods of time. And he received answers, Lord, directly from angels. It's awesome. And we love you. We thank you for the privilege to come before your throne. Help us, Lord, to be diligent to the word and to be diligent in prayer. And I pray this according to your precious name.